Hello and welcome to today's video. This is our discussion video for Strong Female Character by Fern Brady.
This was our book club pick for October and November.
In this video we're going to be telling you what the book is, our ratings, our non-spoilery information, the good, the bad, and then we will go into a spoiler section. Before we go into the spoiler section, there will be both a verbal and visual warning that we are about to go into spoilers. If you do not want spoilers, click off before we get to that section. And after that point, we'll talk about the book in a lot more detail.
We will indeed.
And because this is a memoir, you can't really spoil someone's life. So essentially anything that isn't on the back of the book, we won't be talking about in the non-spoiler section.
Yes, that makes sense.
Yes.
Yes. So before we start talking about this particular book, if this is the first video that you've seen regarding our book club, we're going to link in the description the announcement video and a link to the Discord, and then everything about what this is, you'll be able to see them there.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So I think it's time to get into the book.
Yeah.
Strong Female Character is Fern Brady's memoir, and I would say the thing that it touches on the most is growing up with autism without knowing and without a diagnosis, and everything that comes along with that.
That's a good way to word it. However, the best way to know what to expect from this particular book is just to read the back.
Would you like to read the back?
I would love to. A summary of my book. 1. I'm diagnosed with autism 20 years after telling a doctor I had it. 2. My terrible Catholic childhood. 3. My friendship with an elderly man who runs the corner shop and is definitely not trying to groom me. 4. Homelessness. 5. Stripping. 6. More stripping but with more nervous breakdowns. 7. I hate everyone at Edinburgh Uni, etc. 8 says redacted as too spicy. 9 says, after everyone tells me I don't look autistic, I try to cure my autism and get addicted to Xanax. And 10 is redacted as too embarrassing. And
yeah, I feel like that does give you a very good idea of what to expect.
Yeah, definitely.
That big stuff is about to knock everything off that side.
He's good, isn't he?
So yeah, overall I thought that this was a great book. It was really informative and educational. It was really easy to understand the educational side of it, and it did it in a very interesting way. And overall I've given it 5 stars.
Yeah, I also very much enjoyed it. I also gave it 5 stars. I read this book so quickly. I can't remember. I don't remember how many days it took, but it really wasn't.
It wasn't many.
Yeah, it was like
you picked it up early, scared that you weren't going to read it in time, didn't you?
Yeah,
and then flew through it.
Yeah, I really did. I remember I wrote when I was at the end of chapter 2, I wrote down. Very surprised to find myself 20% of the way through this book already. Very much enjoying it. Yeah, so it was very easy to read. It was really interesting and engaging. I didn't want to put it down. So I ended up not and just blasting through it in less than a week, which is really fast for me to read a book.
Yeah, you did really good.
Thanks.
Jafar, are you getting jealous?
These cats do not like not being the centre of attention.
So I think the next thing we should do, still non-spoilers, but the things that we thought the book did good and the things that we thought the book did bad or kind of bad, or however you want to word it.
You want to let me go first because I have way less than you, and you can probably expand on everything that I say.
Yeah, so I have 5 good and 3 badish.
2 good and 1 bad.
Go for it.
So something that I enjoyed about the book is that we'd previously watched Fern Brady on Taskmaster.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember it amazingly.
Okay.
Could you?
Yeah, definitely some tasks.
There's the odd
task
thing
with the hands.
Where they're looking around looking for their hand in the photo with lots of hands.
No. They had to hold on to each other and go around, but one of them had got a sabotage thing.
Oh yeah, vaguely.
I can really remember that task.
But yeah,
okay.
I wish I could remember it more, but probably not enough to make me want to rewatch it. But I know obviously she's a stand-up comedian, so she's got stand-up content out there that I'd sort of like to watch. But yeah, there were parts where I was reading it and I was aware that I was reading it in her voice, because she's got a very distinctive voice and a distinctive accent.
That's something we haven't actually spoken about, how we read it. So
oh yeah, that's a good point.
I read the physical book, but almost the entire time I was reading this, I also had the audiobook on.
Yeah.
The audiobook for this is narrated by Fern Brady herself and is available on Spotify with the hours that you get if you already have premium.
Yeah.
So I just listened to it through that.
Yeah, so I'd finished it before you'd even started it.
Yeah.
I read it exclusively on my Kindle, and then I'd finished it and I'd had it finished for like a couple of weeks when she started listening to it. And
you heard clips
yeah, because
though.
you first started listening to it in the car, didn't you?
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, this is actually really good being able to listen to it in her voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. This is actually the first memoir that I've ever read, and I get the impression this is a very good one to start with because overall it was very interesting. It touched on some like really interesting things like religion. Obviously it says on the back about like a terrible Catholic childhood. Obviously it also touched on sexual orientation. I don't think that's a spoiler. And obviously neurodiversity as well. You know, it says on the back she got autism diagnosis. And she really goes deep on the like autism stuff. And I think that's really good for like reducing there's
stigma.
Well, yeah, because there is stigma around like autism basically,
which comes from lack of education.
Yeah, of course. And I feel like there was a few places in this book where, having looked at my Kindle highlights today, I haven't looked at them since I actually finished reading it. There's a few things that I've highlighted saying I should need to look into this.
Yeah, I have an entire colour tab that's just like looking into further. So yeah, I
but yeah, it was really informative, whilst I suppose prioritising being really easy to read, because it was super easy to read.
Yeah. I said as one of my good points, like how it explained autism. Like I don't feel like it spoke down at all, but it explained it in such an easy way, like the explanation itself. Because like it wasn't just one explanation, it was consistently throughout the book explaining like how things happened.
Yeah.
And I found that really good in kind of like the same way that you said, like easy but informative.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so kind of related to what you said as well is how it gave very clear references to look into anything that like could be new to you further. So like as someone who has written quite a lot of like papers and stuff, I really enjoyed how the references were done, and like having the proper references at the bottom of the pages where they're referenced and saying exactly where it came from and what study or what book and all that. Like the way that it did that was like, look, this is a part of what I'm writing about here. Gave a quick explanation, and then we got the full reference down below if you wanted to know further. Sometimes that reference would just be like this book by this author. Sometimes that would literally be like a further deeper explanation, and I just find that really, really good.
Yeah, that's a good point actually. I did find the footnotes to be quite interesting. I did click on all of them and read all of them as I was reading it. Yeah, also, have you done all your good? Yes. Okay, so it gave a very open look at someone's life and the spectrum life can have. I thought it was a good fun, okay? Yeah, I don't know, like it didn't feel very filtered, it felt very real. I feel like sometimes, like, I've read quite a few memoirs, sometimes they can be very filtered and you're just getting like snapshots and little pieces. But this felt very real. That's a really good point actually. She's not afraid to make herself look bad. No. That is a good point. Like obviously I've never read any other memoirs, but I can imagine people editing it to make them sound like better. Some people edit it and don't even realise how bad they look. That's the worst kind of memoir you read. I remember when you read that particular one. But yeah, there were points in the book where it sounded like she wasn't very good or very nice. Yeah. And she left that in there for the sake of like the whole truth, I guess. And I also found it was a very realistic portrayal of just how doctors and healthcare professionals can be. Yeah, makes sense. Bit crap. Well, and I also think that it was a very real look at sex work without any prejudice or like bullshit around it. Yeah. Like it was just very like matter of fact. And I feel like you could kind of, it seems like it was maybe on the back to have it appeal to a larger audience. Like it wasn't a massive part of the book, but the way that it was looked at, and it was just like very like matter of fact, here's the point, like no bullshit, no crap. Like it was very, yeah. Do you know what I mean? I do, yeah. Cool. And then I've got 3 things that I wasn't too impressed or like thought were baddish. So I wrote at the end basically maybe this is a thing to speak to a therapist about. Yeah, so I'm going to say that thing. Yeah. I don't think this is a spoiler, because personally I feel like going into books, you know, there should be easy to find trigger content warnings out there. It definitely seemed to me like there was some sort of internalised fat phobia that hadn't yet been worked out with the therapist. Yeah. So, Yeah, basically, that's the only bad thing I wrote.
Yeah, like it wasn't much, but it was a handful of times where it was a bit like, oh, okay, like that's the way to word it.
It almost feels as if she isn't aware of it, or at least she wasn't aware of it when she wrote the book.
Yeah, I feel like, except for the one at the very end, which I'm guessing is the one where you said, like, you know, need to talk about this. The rest of them, because it was talking about her life, like, I didn't really pick up on it. Like, I noticed a couple, but you reckon there were a couple more than what I picked up on.
I think so.
But, you know, like, because it was being written as that age, like, I didn't think much about it, because there were other instances where things were said in the earlier part, but, like, obviously, as you grow and as you're an adult, like, your opinions, things change.
Yeah.
For me personally, it was a bit too accepting of people doing shitty things and shitty things to you. Like, there's a bit too much acceptance there. I'm sure we'll go into that further in the spoilery section, but yeah, that was just a bit like...
That's interesting, because that's not something that I noticed.
Okay.
So yeah, it'll be interesting to discuss.
Yeah, and then the final thing was... I don't think this is technically bad, but I feel like it could be confusing. There were some periods that were kind of like skipped over, like we'd go from like school to university, and like we'd skip quite a big chunk, or like we'd be university and then we'd be at job 1, then we'd be at job 2, and like there were definitely chunks skipped. And after reading a few like paragraphs, I was like, oh, we've just skipped a bit of time, it's fine. But I just feel like it's something very simple, but literally just having that within, you know, chapter 2 3 months later, chapter 7 1 year later, like just having something like that, I feel like would have minimised that confusion. I don't think it's bad, I don't think it was necessarily needed, but when reading like a memoir, I don't think it's uncommon to have something like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just remember that there was something that I found confusing. There was
do tell.
At least one instance where she was like introducing a new character, like a new person that we hadn't like...
Yeah, they're not characters, they're real.
A new person that we hadn't heard anything of before, and she just mentioned them as if we already had. So I remember at least once going back being like, who is this person? I have no memory of this person being introduced, and it's like, oh, they just weren't, like
that was their introduction.
Yeah, that, and I found that confusing. Like, I personally found it annoying that I went back looking for like when that person was introduced.
Yeah, see,
because
I
didn't realise it was an introduction.
I didn't find that, but I'm not surprised that you felt like that, because like we watch TV shows together and you're like, who's this one? It's like, this is literally their character introduction. What are you on about? Who's this one?
Yeah.
So like that doesn't surprise me.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
And that's everything I had to say. Do you have anything else to add to this non-spoilery section?
No, I do not.
Perfect. This is your spoiler warning. If you are watching past this point, expect spoilers, or as spoiler as you can be for a memoir talking about someone's life. But yeah, there's going to be spoilers. We're going to talk in depth about the book from now on. So if you don't want spoilers, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Okay, so we haven't prepped at all for the spoilery section, but I haven't, did you? No. So I think the basic plan is just to go through our copies, our reading, and kind of discuss what jumped out to us. Yeah,
so my highlights are split by chapter, so...
You can start then.
Okay, yeah, cool. I haven't made any highlights until chapter 3.
Good deal, okay.
Actually, no, there is something that I wrote that I do want to talk about. That is a spoiler. So, I really liked the ordering of it. It started with, she's on the phone to her dad saying, I just got an autism diagnosis. And it talks about that like just after diagnosis.
Yeah.
Then it
goes back.
Jumps back to like just before diagnosis. Then it jumps back to her childhood, and then the rest of it's chronological. I thought that was brilliant. I really liked that.
Yeah, I think it's a really good way to introduce it, and like it's a very easy way to like, if you're picking this up, you know by the first chapter if you're into it or not, or if you don't want to do it further.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, so I haven't really highlighted or like made many notes in the first chapter. For me, it was very interesting. It was all just things that, as someone who's like aware of autism, things that like feel very obvious. I don't know, this first chapter is actually larger than I'm expecting, so I have made some notes by the time we get to the end. But yeah, at least for the first big chunk, a lot of it was just like, have you ever noticed you have no ability to read social cues or people's emotions? And I just thought there were some very interesting lines. So things like, I didn't know why I kept putting the same information into this computer and waiting for a different output. He wasn't capable of it. Yeah, and I feel like it was a very good introduction into her autism and her family. I feel like we got all of that within the first chapter.
Yeah.
Personally, like, look, I know this is someone's real life, but I cannot stand her parents. Like, and that's kind of, I mean, we're jumping ahead here, but by the end of the book, she's like talking to her mum, and I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
So like 2 or 3 of these like notes and things are just like, shut this fucking woman out of your life. But I don't believe in second chances, so maybe that's just me. You don't think it's that drastic, I know. I mentioned this to Jay whilst reading it, so I think you might be being a bit over the top here.
Yeah, that does sound familiar.
Yeah, I found it very interesting just how it is written.
Something that not a lot of people know that like is like Asperger's is a diagnosis that isn't really given anymore. It's now just sort of like being rolled into, it's part of the autism spectrum sort of condition.
Yeah, autistic spectrum.
Like, I don't know, group of...
Like Asperger's isn't used, but obviously
Yeah.
the older
generations, like if anyone got a diagnosis like, I don't know, 10 years ago, it might be an Asperger's diagnosis.
rather than autism
Yeah.
diagnosis. So like, especially for the first part of this book, like Asperger's and autism are kind of like interchangeable, and then it kind of gets to a point where like it's more current and up to date,
Yeah.
and then it's just like autism. That is explained at one point.
I was going to say,
book.
it feels like it's explained quite early on
Yeah.
that she sort of like uses them interchangeably, but for various reasons it's not really called Asperger's anymore.
Yeah, I found it really interesting. So she talks about how men she's dated being like not really caring about like the autistic tendencies, but seeing her as this like manic pixie dream girl trope, and I was just like that entire paragraph was just like, yep.
Was that in chapter 3?
No, I'm on chapter 1.
Okay, so I've got a highlight from chapter 3. The highlight is, the pick-me girl appears to me as just another way to dismiss female autistics.
Yeah, that was talked about as well.
Yeah, so I
trope.
Yeah, so I thought,
Yeah,
I thought that was very interesting.
like it very much does talk about like society and society's understanding of people, and like tropes and things that are just prevalent within society, and how like this isn't a good way to like have a like diverse society with lots of people with lots of different like lots of different neurotypical brains, because the typical part is making these things that are just making it more difficult, basically. I think that's the best way to explain it. I also found it interesting, like things that I hadn't even thought of before, so like not understanding idiomatic language, like being under the weather, and I was like, I consider myself to try and be at least base knowledge in most things, like I do try, and like that's something that I'd never even considered, so I found that really, really interesting. And I also found it surprising how much of this stuff is just like, yeah, I agree, like you know, why should we do these things? This doesn't make sense, like make it make sense. So like a big part here is these like meetings and work meetings, and like not understanding like what's the meeting for, then like what is the point of this, and it's like, this should be acceptable, like this should 100% be acceptable. Like, I don't know, I think it calls out a lot of society in a way where it's like she's picking up on it because of her autism, which just makes so much sense, and it's like,
yeah, but it's, these things aren't like, she's not going super hard on like the criticism.
No, she's just like picking up on things.
It's all in the context of her experience.
Having autism and not understanding this thing.
Yeah.
But like it being wrote down and it being set on page, it's like, yeah, like of course this makes sense. Yeah. Like, society's stupid. Yeah. My opinion, not the book's opinion. Yeah, I don't know, like, there's not that much to talk about within the first few chapters. Like, so much happens, and I think it's such interesting reading, and like I can just show like the amount that like I was finding interesting here. I mean, you've got a nice fuck men comment over here. But like there was so much interesting, but it really is just like in the context of her life. Like, I don't know, this feels weird because if you're watching this section, I assume you've already read it, so like there's no point to be like, this is so interesting, like you should definitely read it. But like,
yeah,
if you are in the spoiler section and you haven't read it, I would really recommend it, because like there's so many interesting things going on. Like, there's so much that was just like so informative and so like effective to read. I don't know, but like there's not that much to like discuss and converse about, really, I would say.
So I don't know how the like chapters align with the percentage, but when I was reading on the Kindle, I wrote, when I was at 20%, I was very surprised to find myself this way through. It did feel like it, at that point, it had been mostly about autism, which is interesting because it's like she only got the diagnosis, you know, sort of like later on towards sort of, you know, sort of recently. But it really does set the scene for like all of the stuff in her childhood really well, and I think a lot of the like autism stuff was explained really well as well.
So I think halfway through chapter 2 is kind of when we start getting more into childhood, and honestly I've just got so much written about this like mom who just sounds pretty dreadful.
Yeah, the whole family like, sounds very problematic.
Yeah, and a lot of it is like religious based. Like I've literally had to make a note here, like use contraception or get an abortion if you don't want kids. Like there was so much religious things going on with like this like talk about like sexuality and children and like your point in the world.
Yes.
And it was just like no. And like the author, like Fern Brady, isn't like writing as if she agrees with that, but that was just her experience growing up.
Yeah. There was a point where her grandmother gave her a slap when she sort of off the cuff mentioned that she didn't want children. I made a note about that, having saying that you're gonna have something to say about that, because like that's just such a like,
oh fuck off.
Yeah, it's so strange.
But like for me, if someone did that in my life, I'd be like, goodbye, never again, not talking again, goodbye, don't need you here. Whereas like that just wasn't the case with the book, and I think that's what I kind of meant when I said about the like too accepting of people doing shitty things and being shitty to you. Like it's valid, everyone like has different connections with people and deals with things different ways, and a lot of people would, like emotionally would find it difficult to cut people off, but like gone. I found it very funny, and I don't have a good sense of humour. Like I don't like, but and I feel like some of the things that I found funny were just like the deadpan things. Like it was very much like talking about the dad's mum being like an absolute horror show, but she called her Toodaloo because she thought that was a name. She's like, it's still awkward now I'm in my 30s having to ask if Toodaloo is dead or if she's still in a coma. And it was like, I don't know, like stuff like that. It was like, I don't think that was written to be funny necessarily, but I was just like,
but it is.
Yeah.
But her humour is very deadpan in terms of like when she was on Taskmaster, I seem to recall.
Yeah.
So like very dry, witty.
Oh, I've got, okay, so it's almost at the end of chapter 2 when the grandma hits her, and it's quite glossed over.
It is very matter of fact. I told my grandmother I didn't want kids, and she gave me a slap and said, that's why you're on the earth. And then it's never mentioned again. It's like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. One day I suggested rather casually that I didn't think I'd like to have children, something I felt to be reasonable chit chat given I was 10. She slapped me hard across the face. You were put on this earth to have children. I don't care if you 10 slap the bitch back. Like, oh! Yeah. Like, it was very like, I feel like reading this book, and I don't know if it's because I read the audiobook or like if I would have felt this way if I was only reading like physically with my eyes, but I found it very easily to get like emotionally invested in what was going on.
There's a quote that I highlighted in chapter 4 that made me angry. I can't remember the context around it, but the quote is, that was the only session of one-to-one therapy I received the entire time I was there.
Yes, that's when she's gone to the like
institution
day-to-day mental institution, and it seems like an absolute shit show. I don't know how it was open.
Why did that thing exist if not to provide therapy?
Yeah, do you want to go to that part? Like,
sure,
I don't think I've got that much to say before then, like nothing that's really popping. Oh, there are a couple of things in chapter 3 that I will mention before we go into that chapter. There was a quote that I kind of like did like, I don't know, a little box around. And then something weird happened. I looked around at everyone and suddenly realised, with something far beyond a 14-year-old's perspective, that this social order, this hierarchy, none of this was permanent and everything would be okay. A sense of absolute peace came over me. I laughed a little in disbelief at the switch in my brain. It was like I'd zoomed out of being a teenager and been given an objective view of the rest of our lives. The sense of peace stayed with me for the rest of the trip as the girls glared and muttered about me when we boarded the bus home. And it's just so like, this was like, I don't know if it was a big moment or not, but it like really stuck out to me. Yeah,
that is really, I don't really remember that part of it. But yeah, that is very like, Damn.
Yeah, and then we've already spoken about the pick-me trope. You already pointed that
Yeah,
out. That's the only other thing I think I've got highlighted.
Okay.
In chapter 3. So yeah, let's go to chapter 4. What have you got? What have you got that you'd like to discuss?
Something that I highlighted because I intended on looking into it more and have since totally forgotten to. She claims that allistic is the word for like non-autistic people. Yeah. Allistic talking therapies are almost totally useless for autistics, which sounds very interesting to me. I think that's something that I'd like to double check if she had like a reference for that, and if that is the case, that's interesting. I'd really like to know more about like why that's the case.
Yeah, so I also found it very interesting that so in chapter 4 we essentially go from her grandma's having an affair and that's just glossed over.
Yeah.
She expresses her worries. She really tries to express herself and explain what's going on in her head in this chapter. But there's a lot that's going on in like her personal life, and there's a lot that's going on within herself. And she really tries to like outlet that to other people, and it's just pushed aside every time.
It really falls on deaf ears, doesn't it?
Yeah, and honestly most of this is the mother. And I know that by the end she's like, oh, I'm trying my best and all that, but she didn't.
Yeah.
I'm not being funny, but it doesn't take a lot to listen. It really doesn't. Honestly, there's just pages that were very, not easy to read, honestly. The book is a very easy to read book, but there were multiple pages within chapter 4 where it was just, heavy after heavy after heavy. And during chapter 4, she does end up having to leave the school and go to what was essentially, it was a mental institution, but she wasn't sleeping there. It was day to day.
And that sounded really rubbish, didn't it?
And it honestly just sounded like this thing should have been shut down. Everyone there should have lost their jobs and not been allowed to work with people who needed help again.
Did it remind you of American Horror Story?
A little, yeah.
It really did sound torturous almost, didn't it?
Yeah, it wasn't to that same extent. There was no physical actions that were wrote about there, at least that I remember, but mentally and emotionally the capacity of the people at this place was just dreadful. And it was just how do people get jobs in this industry? Why do people want jobs in this industry if they don't actually want to help people? It was, I think it was probably the most real and honest and very raw account of anything like this sort of institution that I've read. I do want to read Paris Hilton's memoir at some point. Obviously I know that will go into it a lot as well, but yeah, it was very shocking to read. Even knowing that these things exist, actually reading it and reading the day-to-day was very, very shocking. Yeah,
because it's not something that's talked about very often, is it?
No.
The systems that are in place to help people with mental health difficulties. I remember when I was reading it thinking about the staff in that institution thing. I wonder if any of those have read this book.
I hope so.
If so, is it very hard to read? Because presumably these things are true. And to be able to actually get into the head of the patients that you were serving all those years ago and see how it was from their perspective.
I don't think they care. If you're that much of a bitch, you're that much of a bitch.
Well, I mean, hopefully they've grown up.
Well,
yeah,
I really found it odd how in this chapter, but it is mentioned a few times afterwards as well, this was just ignored by her family. She was going to this mental institution and her family ignored it. They pretended it wasn't happening.
Yeah, they did.
It was really weird. And there is a point in this where it says some things finally started, I wouldn't say getting better, but the mental institution essentially stopped trying with her and just put her in a room. She's having a quiet place to revise and not feel overwhelmed by the need to pretend to be a normal teenager for 8 hours a day was good enough for me. That's all she wanted, was just a quiet place to get on with her studies, her school. That's what she wanted. It was just so, yeah.
Yeah, I guess it tells you a lot about what her home life was like without actually saying it.
Yeah.
Because for a lot of kids, their bedroom is that place where they can go and do what they want to do in private. She obviously didn't have that.
Yeah, and I also think there was a lot of gaslighting going on of the people working at this mental institute towards her, especially just the odd question. It's it was almost like they were treating her and the other people there like they were criminals and were out to kill all of them or something. It was absolutely crazy.
There was a weird comment about she was making conversation with one of the staff members,
and they reported her and she got all this stuff. Oh, it is, yeah.
yeah, basically that institution place that she went to sounds horrible.
I did really like, there was a small little section, it was only like 2 paragraphs long, but it's about emotive language and how like cursing should just be like normal, like it's literally emotive language, and at the age of 12 that is like, could be learned and understood by people. And this was brought up because like in the mental institution, like basic words were like not okay to say, and it was just crazy, and it was just like, ah, yeah, this is just old people now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Yeah, it was very, very interesting. I feel like I don't have much more to actually say on this section.
It definitely did touch on a lot of interesting things.
Yeah.
But like, obviously, it only touched on them. Chapter 5, I've got one thing to say about chapter 5.
You go for chapter 5 then?
There was a scientific explanation which I actually like thought was really good. I understand that my body overreacts due to my amygdala being too large, and so I must mentally talk down a disproportionate fight or flight response that perceives any loud noise, shouting, confusing facial features or tone of voice as immediate threats.
Yeah.
Like, she's obviously had to tell herself that many times. And it's, you know, it's a very like rational, scientific
way of thinking about it.
Yeah, to like try and bring herself down from that very heightened emotional state. I'm not sure why, but yeah, I just found that very interesting.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of that in chapter 5. There was also interoception, I want to say. But that was like the ability to notice and address internal bodily sensations, and there was a lot of talk about like safe foods and comfort foods and like narrowing down like any stresses that could be happening. And yeah, we really just go through life more. And in this chapter is also where she starts and continues to get kicked out of home, even when she's like still a teenager, like she's not even in university yet, like she just continues to get kicked out of home. And it was very interesting how like, even looking back, she's obviously aware of it, but like packing to leave home, and it was like packing all of these really important things for her, and it's like, but the toothbrush, the deodorant, the clean clothes, they'd have to wait because like they didn't make the importance list, or like the things that she like couldn't live without. So I found that very interesting.
Yeah, it was very like, hearing more about like why she was kicked out was very interesting, because it does like, her parents had this very like, I don't know, narrow definition of like what a life is about, and it like feels like she wasn't able to fit into that, so they're like, they thought she was playing up intentionally, whereas obviously she just had like a disability and they just had no ability to sort of recognise that and actually try and help her. They just thought she was being horrible and they gave up on her, I guess, by kicking her out. Yeah,
on page 132, which is about halfway through chapter 5, there's a part that I highlighted, and it's on about how her parents were just overreacting about like, I'm pretty sure it's her brother was smoking weed, and it was like they did like an interrogation that lasted all night and I wouldn't let them leave. But this was so insane, I vowed at this point to cut them out of my life as soon as I left home. It was just like, yeah, like, yeah, do it.
Yeah, that's not a normal like behaviour, is it?
No. And it talks a lot at this point about developing routines, but obviously that was very difficult. I feel like from this point in the book she's aware that like these routines and developing routines were very helpful, but because of her life and like her situation and her home situation, it wasn't an easy thing to like consistently keep on top of, and that's what led to a lot of the further issues.
That, I don't think I picked up on that, Laz.
No,
that's, yeah, I mean probably, and that's a really interesting observation.
There's weird boyfriends at this point, but nothing that really stuck out. And then she punched someone.
Yeah.
And like could have gone into like a lot of legal trouble, and I'm really surprised it made the book, to be honest, because I feel like that legal trouble could still come if but yeah, and it was really interesting. This is the point where you wrote about the amygdala, and that's like how she knew, was like looking back she knows that like she reacted this way because of that.
Yeah.
But this was all literally just like the way I saw it at the time. If I hadn't have done that, she would have attacked me first. And like it is like a very like changed perception of like the fight or flight response. I feel.
Yeah, and it is interesting that she's like gone in and added, like, even though that chapter is from the perspective of, you know, a 17-year-old or whatever she was, she's gone in and added the like scientific point of view from her as an adult. That's probably why I highlighted actually. I thought that was really good.
Right, chapter 6.
I have a highlight from chapter 6.
Do tell.
I like how the chapters all begin with a quote. So I highlighted the quote from chapter 6.
I've highlighted a lot of the quotes from the start of chapters, but not the one from chapter 6.
Oh, very interesting.
Oh.
The quote itself for chapter 6 didn't particularly resonate with me. I highlighted it because I think that's the point where I noticed that there's a theme,
Okay.
that there was a quote from someone else that related to the chapter.
To what would be happening in that chapter.
So yeah, that's when I clocked it, so I highlighted it. Yeah, that's the point that I clocked. That is like, these quotes are relevant to the chapter. This is happening like throughout the book now.
Like foreshadowing.
Yeah, and like I was like, I like this is good.
Yeah. It also talked quite a bit about like the opinions of like women who like were comfortable with their sexuality and wanting sex at this point as well. Like, and it definitely talks about like, I don't know, so one point that I learned is, unfortunately, because he's fit and because I wanted to, did not fly in 2004, and there was definitely like slut shaming there.
Yeah.
And I feel like it was relevant to say, but then we did have quite a big section of like going over and over this and why girls were reacting like this and all this. And as much as I felt like the things itself were important to like highlight and these things happened to her and these were like, you know, very important to add and like they were important to talk about, a lot of the description and the talk about it felt very redundant now because it's just not the case. Like a lot of the things that would be in, you know, how like something's happened and then we talk about it. Like in this chapter, the things that were surrounding like the like slut shame and stuff like that, it was important to talk about, but I feel like the explanations and the going into it just felt a little bit redundant to me. It was like, you know, like 10 years later, like 15 years later, I don't know exactly when she went to university, like this just isn't the case.
But if a 50-year-old was reading this,
yeah, that's true,
something on page 148, totally unrelated, I highlighted something that made me think about you.
God. Okay.
I decided to only eat bagels because they were simple, they didn't overwhelm me, plus I like their shape. That's just so you.
This is where it talks about being able to ask for help as well, and how like if you're realistic, you likely take for granted that when you're not sure of something, you ask someone for help. Autism is so insular and self-contained that for us, asking for help sometimes feels like going against our nature. The dropout rate for autistic students is 10 times higher than for non-autistic students, and it's thought that because most students tend to help each other by crowdsourcing information from their peers.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, like a lot of this was talked about. So I think the other thing in chapter 6 that I really noticed was she was really getting fucked over with her student loan. Like her student loan was basically like calculated incorrectly, and it just kind of made me think like if she did have the ability to advocate for herself a bit more, that probably wouldn't have happened for so long, and like maybe could have got sorted sooner.
And the university should have been able to help her with it, really, shouldn't they?
Yeah.
There obviously wasn't, you know, a welfare person at the university who was like looking out for her because, well, the autism was missed, I guess.
And then she got into like a very bad relationship. We'll talk about it more in the next chapter. But one thing that I did think was very important to note, like we're talking about this bad relationship, all this stuff, everyone loved him except Lauren. And Lauren, we've known for it most of the book, she's like the one person that's been made very clear that she thinks is like a really good judge of character, and it's like maybe listen to her.
Yeah, I mean that's probably something that she's sort of later on realised was the case, and that's why she put it in the book.
Everyone loves him except Lauren. It's just a bit like, wow, like, yeah. And then the last thing for chapter 6, I started to notice when weird social interactions, should we say, were happening, when social interactions were happening that were different to the norm, it seemed to very quickly be like Protestant. Like she was raised around all Catholic people, and quite often it was like, oh, there's this weird thing happening, must be Protestant, oh, it's a Protestant thing.
Yeah, I hadn't picked up on that, but like when you mentioned it earlier, it's like, yeah, that really is the case, and that is really interesting how like in her head it's Catholics and Protestants, and it's like because it's not how she was raised, she thinks it's like
the Protestant way to do
all of
things.
the other group does it like that. Which, well, very interesting.
And then we're at chapter 7.
Yeah.
So the relationship is what takes up the majority of this chapter, I'd say, and it's just a toxic relationship. At one point he tries to kill her. Like he actually tries to kill her, they have to go to court and everything. She keeps getting back together with him, and it's just a very, very toxic relationship, and it's just really shit. And like, I mean, she does acknowledge it. You highlighted where she acknowledges it.
I highlighted in chapter 7. She said, "It occurred to me right at that second I was almost definitely in a toxic relationship," and I added a note. At least she realised, like,
yeah, but it was still like, obviously she realised at a point, but like, where was anyone else? Who were like her real friends who was there? Like, was anyone else seeing this? It sounded like some of these things were happening fairly publicly, and like nothing was done, nothing was helped.
At least it's not mentioned. If
yeah, so. And then the other thing is her dad left her mum around this time, and she was so shocked by it that she stopped eating as often. And it was just very like a first little inkling of like when things get stressful, when things get too much, like food is one of the first things that's like simplified and taken down. Yeah,
it was a very interesting relationship of like, this thing happened, therefore eating less.
Also during this chapter is the first few times where, well, I'm pretty sure it's the first few times where she's mentioned being like interested in comedy, and like this idea of like, oh, like I could do that. And I think it's mainly like watching obnoxiously alpha male stand-up comedian, and afterwards I said I could do that, and it was like the first kind of thing. And like, obviously if I didn't know she was a comedian, I don't think that would have stood out, but it definitely seemed to be that.
Yeah, makes sense.
And this is also the chapter very later on, because like most of this chapter is about this relationship, and it was just like not nice to read about and not a nice time, and there's not really much to say in it. But later on in the chapter it does say she was at the doctor and said, I think I might have Asperger's. I told him one day I'd been mulling it over for a few years and finally had the confidence to say it to the doctor. The psychiatrist shook his head immediately, chuckling at the ridiculousness of my suggestion. This was when I was told I didn't fit the criteria because I was making eye contact and I'd had boyfriends. At the time, my faith in doctors and their absolute infallibility was so all-encompassing I felt stupid for even mentioning it. What with my incredible eye contact, this eye contact that he believed would carry me through life. Yeah, and I just think it really shows like just how crap doctors are and how little they care. And like, if someone comes to you with a problem and for your entire education you've spent 1 hour looking into this thing or one tiny little thing, how about take 10 minutes and refresh your knowledge, see if there's anything new out there. I don't know, actually care. It's like
yeah,
doctors tend to not give a shit. Oh yeah, right at the very end of this chapter it is kind of brushed over and glossed over, but it definitely seems like she tried to kill herself. And it was made very clear to her when talking to someone to discharge her that saying so would mean she'd be kept there, so she said no. And it was very glossed over, but I feel like it was very like impactful and important to like what had been going on in her life.
Yeah, definitely. So chapter 8 was pretty much about her time as a stripper.
Yeah.
It starts with a very interesting quote.
Ooh, yeah, we both highlighted it.
Yeah, we both highlighted this section. So some guy asks her, oh, did stripping make you hate men? And her response was, the question implied that stripping had clouded my judgment and made me a grizzled hag grazing angrily into the middle distance, rather than giving me perfect clarity over the fact that the world hates women. I highlighted that because that's...
This cat would like attention. Yes? Yes?
Yes. I highlighted that because the question was a very simple question, but it was a very loaded, like, there's a lot of assumptions baked into that question, and her way of thinking about it goes very deep and has a lot of, I don't know, like it pulls apart those assumptions.
I definitely think it's interesting to hear a man's perspective on it. No, look, I'm not taking the piss. I'm just like, you thinking that goes very deep. It's just like, no, that's life.
Okay.
Yeah, and I felt like there was a lot said here about like workplace culture. One of the things that I highlighted was women do get groped in the workplace and are too ashamed to say anything, because normal workplaces keep up the pretense that women are equal to their male colleagues. The bind is this: I've never lost jobs in a strip club for speaking out about male harassment. We had no shame in calling men out in the clubs. Instead, we just had the offensive man immediately removed by a big Latvian baser on steroids. How many women can say the same in Hollywood, comedy, the media, the music industry, or any number of professions that have their own sexual harassment scandals? And there was lots of like little tiny snippets like this that were very much just like talking about society in general, but also how that related to how good of a job stripping was for her. Yeah,
I think at this point, so we had mentioned that this chapter has a lot of new people introduced who are like...
A lot of weird.
Yeah.
Like, I don't mean weird in like a nasty way, I just mean like, yeah, sure, let's invite your dad to the strip club whilst you're at his out. Let's like have these women who are odd. Let's just go with odd. Let's go with odd. This, like, you know, this person who seems really good, and then this person who's like a stereotypical like slimy person. Like, there was a lot.
I guess like in this chapter her worldview is starting to expand.
Yes.
And I think that's very interesting.
And yeah, honestly, a lot of this is literally just thought on stripping and like how good of a job it was for her, but also like calling out the differences between that job and like general workplaces.
Yeah.
I don't think there's much to really comment on. It all made sense. It was all very like interesting. Some of it was thought-provoking, and it was very interesting to read. One last thing right at the end of chapter 8, if I can find it. Here. It does talk a little bit about a like documentary that was made called Selling Sex, and a lot of it was to do with stripping. And it looks like, so one, it's by Lou, which is shocking because like honestly like he's very well known for his documentaries and what he does, and like I don't think I've watched any, but that's what like I know him for.
Yeah, I got the impression that his documentaries are meant to be quite unbiased and
like look at all perspectives.
Yeah, I guess.
But it looks like most aggravated interviewees was an autistic woman whose autism was referred to once in the programme and never again, despite her visibly stimming, rubbing her hands together and fidgeting anxiously while speaking with Louis. And it would just very much seem to be this thing that like was scanned over, wasn't really looked into properly. There's quite a big section on it. Like, I'd definitely, if you've got the book or got like a copy of it, it's page 201 and 202, and it was very, very interesting. Like, you can probably find copies online somewhere. But then there was also another documentary made by Louis Frew called Extreme Love Autism. It very much also seemed to have very negative impacts. One of the things that I highlighted was the vast majority of people understanding of autism is sparse and informed by people who are autism adjacent rather than autistics themselves. So it's infuriating that when we do finally identify ourselves to the media, we're so easily dismissed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was that. Don't really have anything to say on it, but just found it very interesting and wanted to mention it.
Yeah.
Chapter 9.
Something that generally I'm picking up as we're like starting to get more into the her being an adult is how her view of the world is very real. Like, she sees things for what they are as opposed to what society wants her to see them as. And I think that's like,
yeah,
really
there was even like, you know, not much, two little paragraphs, but talk about euthanasia being illegal in Britain and stuff like that. And it was like, you know, there was little things like this like dropped throughout the book, but it was just very interesting. And I think by this point she was like, I'm going to say these words, I'm not sure if these are the words that are used in the book or the correct words, but I would say like abusing pills. Like, she seemed to take a pill to get through the day and then take a pill to sleep. And we kind of see in this chapter it start to affect her in a negative way. So for instance, the sleeping pill hadn't worn off. As a result, I was more autistic than usual and needed faculty laid out for me. And it's very much like, I don't know, like obviously that's not negatively impacting her, but this is like a situation where someone's dying and it's just very, there's lots of things going on, and then it'll be her needing a fact clarified, lots of things going on, her needing a fact clarified. And I just feel like it really makes it stand out more. The very last page of chapter 9, I told them I'd realised it was my life's purpose to become a stand-up comedian. And I don't know, like, I just feel like that's really nice. Like, it's what she does now.
Yeah, it feels very out there, but like from our perspective, like we know that that's what she goes on to do. So like, yeah, it is very cool, isn't it?
Okay, so we start out chapter 10 kind of talking a little bit more about figuring out her sexual identity and dating both women and men, which like all had been mentioned previously, but I feel like chapter 10, at least the start of it, is where we kind of more started like it being more of an open discussion rather than just a thing that's going on in the background, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't have anything from chapter 10 highlighted at all.
Okay, if you've ever started school midway through the school year or been the new person at work and felt lost, it's that feeling. Except you never just pick up on stuff or fall in line eventually. It's a constant sense that everyone is in a WhatsApp group and you don't know about it. like talking about like not feeling like she fit in and like not knowing what was going on. Yeah, and just saying like that feeling is recurrent in autistics.
Yeah.
Except for that, there was just a lot of bad advice. Yes, there was just a lot of advice that was very much for like neurotypical people, and she, you know, isn't. She's neurodivergent, and I don't think that she like knew that at this time. I don't think like within the timeline that's where it was, but she was just taking a lot of this advice and thinking if she kept going and kept taking this advice and kept doing these things that it was saying, it would work for her, and like it just caused what was essentially a lot of low points.
Yeah.
And then also partway through chapter 10 we have a line of, my editor ordered me to try stand up and write an article about it. I spent 6 weeks shaking and feeling nauseous, but was secretly thrilled at the opportunity. He'd had no idea I wanted to do it anyway, but if he hadn't told me to, I'd have kept sending secret letters to my local comedy clubs asking for advice and hoping someone in my personal life would tell me I was good enough. So it never would have happened. This way I was forced to do it. I just found that really interesting. Like,
yeah,
it was obviously something she was very aware of and like wanted to do, and it was like this push that like she needed, but wasn't even like a push that was like to push. Like, it was an unknown push.
Yeah, I can definitely like feel what she means, where it's like she was waiting for someone to tell her and she was like asking for advice. Yeah, whereas sometimes you just need to do something.
And then a lot of this is just about final year of university and trying to juggle all these different things, and it basically got to the point where she went to the finance office and was like, look, I've been doing all this for my way, I've been doing all this, I've been doing all this, and after all this big conversation, this big build up, they came back to her just being like, turns out you've made a mistake, and like gave her $9,000 overnight basically because they've made that much of a mistake with a student loan. And it was, I feel like I've glossed over it, but it was a very, very like impactful, important, you know, few paragraphs.
Yeah. I feel like every chapter has those moments where it's like something really sort of deep happens, or she goes in really deep into like one specific thing.
And then in chapter 11 we talk about like emotions and sadness and dealing with emotions, especially like being on the spectrum. And we've got here alexithymia, might not be pronouncing that right, is the limited ability to recognise and describe the emotions you're feeling. It also means your mind fails to register the physical symptoms of anxiety as early as it should. People with alexithymia are not emotionless, rather we feel huge emotions, but there's a disconnect in our ability to properly acknowledge them. And this was very much like a lot of change was going on, like a breakup, end of university, like just figuring out what to do and just feeling sad and knowing there was too much but not knowing exactly what to do. And then the next kind of reference point kind of just says that autistic people are between 25 and 50% more likely to have alexithymia than the general population, but it's also far more likely to be a coping mechanism for PTSD, and because of the vulnerability of autistic people being rejected by family, mental illness, social isolation, it's far more likely to be traumatised, so it's tricky to separate one from the other. I don't know, I just find that they're interesting. That's definitely something that I'd like to look into more and like understand more. Yeah,
that's the sort of thing that I expected that I would have known about, but I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
So I found that very interesting too.
Yeah, and then it does talk a little bit here, like she's starting to understand how weird like society is about food and culture and like how thin and fat people are. And there's a curious yet rarely discussed tendency among middle and upper class women to police what each other eat. I've only ever come across it among these groups. It seems to be passed down from mother to daughter, and it's the cause of so much stress.
See, I can believe that, but I don't think I've ever witnessed it.
Oh, like it's definitely a thing.
Yeah, I'm not denying that.
But I don't know how it would be a thing that you'd witness.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So, chapter 12, if you go to page 253, I'd be interested to see if you've highlighted the same thing that I've highlighted.
253?
Yeah. I wish I could go back to being fat and happy, but it was simple social economics. I didn't have the social currency to be fat.
No,
I wasn't likeable.
See,
I highlighted that and wrote, well, I guess this is the next thing to talk to the therapist about. Because, like, I think for me, like, there'd been a couple of mentions of like fat people in a negative way, but I feel like this was the first point that I realised she's definitely got like some internalised fat phobia.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. I don't think I took it that deep, to be honest.
Yeah,
like, I don't know, I'm not...
Maybe it jumped out to me more because it's the first time I noticed it.
I don't know, for me, this reads more like the link between, like, if someone did something weird socially, they're Protestant. So this is more like, oh, if you are struggling being, like, accepted socially or publicly, well, obviously, like, she's autistic, but it also would be the same if you had fat, and like she's just linked that and not really thought much about the cross.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't think much of it. I at the start of chapter 12, I'm surprised by how little you've highlighted.
Okay.
At the start of chapter 12, it says, by the time I was 25, I'd had somewhere in the region of 50 jobs. I've been sacked over and over again.
That is very interesting. Yeah, I'm surprised I didn't highlight that as well, actually.
The autistic comedian Hannah Gadsby pointed out that there aren't many autistic-friendly openings for women, claiming that the workplace is not suited to us because of a lot of the jobs that appeal to our way of thinking are closed off to women or are really hostile to them. And this was very much talking about like trying to find a job that fit like requirements and just struggling to do that. All of the jobs that seemed open to me were reliant on my performing femininity correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's just a lot written. And how, you know, she'd be able to get these jobs because in this short little interview she could mask and she could very easily like show up and do the job interview for a little bit and like be able to deal with that. But then by the time it actually got to the job and trying to keep that up, it was so difficult that she'd like very easily get fired from them. Also in this chapter to do with work, it's on about making like reasonable like adaptations, accommodations.
Yeah. And
she was very much on about putting like headphones on. It was like, you know, the headphones weren't altering or working anyway, it's just making it easier for her, but she wasn't allowed. Like, it was picked up that she wasn't allowed to wear headphones because it made her seem like unsociable. Like, even though her entire job was filling out forms and replying to emails, like, yeah, it was just very, very weird.
I found that part interesting because I've never had a job where people putting headphones on when they need to concentrate on something is not just like a very normal thing.
But you've never had like any sort of customer facing or customer role job, you've only ever worked in tech.
Yeah, but her job that she's describing there was, she said she was just filling out forms.
And replying to emails. So even though it's not on the phone, even though it's not in person talking.
Yeah. It's still, it's still more of a customer service.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And towards the end of chapter 12, we also get the point of a mom coming to a comedy event, even though she banned her from coming to gigs. And it's like, oh, was she there then?
Yeah.
Like, this isn't okay.
And the mom seemed to make a big deal out of it, didn't she?
Yeah, it was just really weird.
Yeah.
It seemed like she didn't find it funny and was there and just like moaning to her friends and stuff. I don't know, like, it wasn't good. I really don't like this mother.
Yeah.
Like, cut the bitch. And then it also goes on a bit in this chapter about copying people and like trying to fit in that way. I don't think I've got much more to add. But she does talk about Xanax in this chapter as well, and how very much like, you know, this was just given to her. She was, I've been filming a series that involved travelling around Europe and one of the crew gave me a couple for the flight. I remember how quickly it kicked in and knocked me off my feet, and it was very much like how much this still helped her. And a couple of paragraphs later she says, this was still pre-diagnosis, no one knew why I smashed furniture, the friends I'd confided in looked uncomfortable, the useless therapist didn't have an answer, even the NHS psychiatrist couldn't tell me anything. And then another couple of paragraphs down she says, self-medicating with whatever was available, I started taking Ritalin, brought from the same dealer in the day to balance out the Xanax. Reminded me of Provigil, the anti-narcolepsy drug I'd taken, again unprescribed at university to concentrate on my dissertation, but no took just because. And it very much talks about that. And we go into a lot of detail on it, but like there's not really much to discuss, but it was very interesting. I feel like one thing that we haven't really discussed yet, I think chapter 13 is, no, we've got 14 as well, so we've got 2 chapters there. But a few times when she's in present day, she's talking quite a bit about her current boyfriend and how much he's helped.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a big point, so it hasn't been, like, we haven't mentioned it and discussed it, but I do feel like it's important to mention. Like, it does seem that like he really helped her and like pushed her to get this diagnosis and pushed her to like get help. Chapter 13, do you have anything?
I do. The body registers excitement the same way it registers anxiety, which is something that we've spoken about a lot before, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just because it's true, and it's a very good way to like reframe anxiety. She also mentioned spoon theory, which I thought was good. Like, obviously, you know, it's a pretty sort of common thing to be talked about nowadays, but I still just think it's such a good way of explaining to like, you know, broader general public. Like,
well, I think it's such a good thing to have the basics in this book, because I think a lot of people picking up this book are not going to be picking it up because like they already have loads of knowledge in autism and like want to read it for that. I think a lot of people are going to be picking up this book just for the personality or the comedy.
Or they saw the series of Taskmaster that she was on and she was like, they're like, oh, she's funny, she's got a book.
I'll read a book.
Yeah, I'll read a book.
And I do think it's also interesting. So personally, I would call this like a memoir or a biography. That's how I would classify it. But actually, this has just come, I think, 6th in the Goodreads Choice Awards, and it got put in the humour category rather than the memoir biography category. And I find that really interesting because if it is being shelved that way and marketed that way, especially in bookstores, it's got even more of a chance of getting into like a broader audience.
Yeah, definitely.
Who are going to be picking it up.
So yeah, it is good that these things are covered, and it's not even like, yeah, you worded it really well when you said she's not like talking down. She's just bringing these things up as like
an explanation.
Yeah, just like a normal thing to talk about.
Yeah.
Without the judgment.
I think it's really good. In this chapter, we kind of learn how she's been seeing a therapist and how that therapist is helping her talk to other people about what she needs, her requirements, without feeling the need to like be telling everyone like, this is because I'm autistic, unless she wants to and feels comfortable doing that. Instead of saying fluorescent lights give you meltdowns, say instead that you have a migraine. You can't come out as autistic to everyone, and that in itself can be exhausting. Teaching me how to relearn my way of being autistic, which had for too long involved me hiding my stress for everyone else's benefits at the cost of my own health. And that's really what I think a lot of this chapter is about, just like coming to terms with it, explaining to people, explaining to herself, and just like learning how to do things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add. There's a lot of just like metaphors and talking about it and like deciding between different things. Quite a fair few pages of this chapter is her just having like a really difficult time when her nails were cut incorrectly, and really going through the entire process of that and why it was such a big deal and why it affected her and why it would affect like other autistic people, and really explaining why that could be a thing. Yeah,
that was a really good example to use as well, I think, because like cutting your nails is such a like
everyone has to do it.
It's just such a normal part of everyday life. So like, yeah, I thought it was really good how she went into the real deep dive into like what the sensory perspective of that is, like for her. Definitely. Because like, yeah, most people probably don't think, you don't think twice about cutting your nails.
And during this chapter, she talks even more about her like meltdowns and how meltdowns are different to shutdowns, and like really explains this. And I think what's really interesting in this is just the way that she talks about how like the lack of knowledge is really not helping people, and how many people, especially in America, where for some reason police carry guns, die because of this. And it was quite shocking because it was stuff that I didn't know. Like, I'd seen video, I was aware of one case, but like not that it was a continuous thing. And like, I consume quite a lot of like true crime, like justice-y like things on the internet. So the fact that there were, I think there were like 4 or 5 examples given and I'd only heard of one, I was like, this happens like a lot more than you realise, and especially when it's happening to kids. Like, one of these is about a 9-year-old girl who's getting handcuffed by police, and it's like, yeah, she's a threat. Yeah,
the police obviously don't have any training about neurodiversity, do they?
Yeah. And then it talks about her actually like keeping a better track and kind of like tracking what causes meltdowns, what causes her stress, what causes her anxiety.
Yeah, I remember that she'd written a list of the things that like help and the things that sort of make things worse.
Yeah,
I found it very interesting that she put that cannabis on both. And she did go into a little bit of it sort of, I know, like a little bit of explanation as to like why she thought that was.
Yeah, so what I found really interesting is that she says like starting in January 2020, this is how she was doing this, and how she thought that sleep disruption would be there, and build up of external noise and light, hormonal changes and all this stuff. And reducing meltdowns became a full-time job wherein I was both the scientist and the lab rat. I managed to reduce them to the point that I was having them only in the week leading up to my period, where I'd felt defeated. And then like a few pages later, like we've spoken about other things, and a few pages later, 6 months in, and the year of tracking meltdowns seemed to be paying off. I used my autism to spot patterns in what caused them and was certain I'd find the solution. And then a few pages later to that, we talk even more about the fact that, like, do you know, like, they haven't like completely stopped being a thing, and she was struggling with that and kind of needing to be told, like, we don't need to get from like 100 to 0. Like, look at the process and look at the progress that's being made. And also right at the end of chapter 13 was a little bit about being on Taskmaster and how, like, I felt very pure happiness that I didn't feel in the hellish forced group banter panel shows. And I don't know, like, it was only a tiny little bit, but we are big Taskmaster fans.
It was nice because that's how I'd never heard of Fern Brady before Taskmaster, I don't think.
No.
So yeah, it was nice that, like, our introduction to her was through Taskmaster, and then she's like...
I mean, my introduction to all comedians are through Taskmaster because I really don't like comedy.
Yeah.
So, like, I feel like there's no point being interested in comedians unless, like, they are actually able to be funny.
Fair enough, yeah.
Like, I don't know, most aren't. But yeah, anyway. Chapter 14, it's all pretty much over about her boyfriend, the lockdowns and how that was for her and her mom, and forgiving her mom and being friends again and accepting that. And I just, do you know what, chapter 14 was not for me, but maybe that's just because I am a moody bitch who won't forgive anyone for anything. So I will let you talk about chapter 14 if there's anything you'd like to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting how at the very beginning of the book she mentioned that her mom had been crying loads because of, like, missing the autism, and I thought that would kind of sort of signal that, like, she actually had a supportive mother, but then obviously
no, she didn't.
Throughout the whole book she definitely did not. So yeah, it was a bit weird that, like, at the end of the book she was like...
But even at the start, the crying, like, that's so fucking, like, emotionally manipulative.
I mean,
like,
well,
someone's calling on you, someone's telling you something, someone's, like, it's their life, they're going through something, and you're going to react in such an emotional way. That's just manipulation.
I'm not sure I agree.
Well, you don't have to. I'm right.
You always are. Yeah, we should be sitting the other way around, shouldn't we?
Yeah, Heather's always right.
Heather's always right.
That's how Jay sorts our food out without mixing it up. Or our glasses with pop. He always puts mine on the right because Heather's always right.
Heather's always right.
Yeah, so I think that's everything we need to talk about. I think that's, like, all of it.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else you want to add? I think we've spoken about everything. Like, there's a lot more in here, but we've been talking for fucking ages.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, because it's like we don't want to rehash the entire book, do we?
No.
It's definitely worth reading. I can't think of any reason why anybody should not read this book. Like, I can't think of any...
I definitely think check the triggers. I feel like it's more important to look after yourself and your mental health. Like, this is an amazing book if you are in a healthy mindset and able to deal with it. There's a lot of talk of self-harm, there's a lot of talk of eating, mental illness, and like suicidal ideations. So I definitely feel like if that's not something that you feel mentally okay reading about right now, don't. Look after yourself first.
That is a very good point. You worded that very well.
Why did I word it well? Why was it a good point? Heather's always right.
Heather's always right.
But yeah, I think that's it for today.
Yeah.
Cool.
Shady Hollow's the next one.
Shady Hollow is the next one.
And I'm going to take better notes.
You are going to take better notes. I've probably cut all of the waiting time out, but Joe didn't take notes because he was enjoying it so much, but then he read it like 4 weeks ago and can't remember anything, so we've had to wait around for Joe to remember things quite a bit. But yeah, I do really hope that you enjoyed the video.
Me too.
Do give it a like if you did like it.
Subscribe down below.
If you'd like to see more content like this, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Bye!